You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We're delighted to reach you from our home on the web, WMClive.com, where you can find links to all our online channels, including Ustream and podcast. Remember that if you're interrupted or whatever, you can find us at your convenience as a podcast, and the day after each program, find a transcript of the show at womensmediacenter.com. Also, tell us what you're thinking. Tweet to hashtag WMC Live or call the comment line 347-903-WMC1. We have some great guests this week. We have Ellen Snortland, author and activist for women and girls self-defense. We have Lynn Povich on her new book, The Good Girls Revolt, How the Women of Newsweek Sued Their Bosses and Changed the Workplace. And we have Gloria Feldt, one-woman feminist movement. And we have Karen Lewis, president of the Chicago Teachers Union and leader of the strike that's being watched by the nation. But first, behind the headlines. Most of the punditry babble about the Chicago teachers' strike stems from either-or thinking, as if what's good for the children isn't good for the teachers, and vice versa. This is, the kind of nonsense spewed by minds seemingly unable to chafe two cells together and spark a single ratiocinative thought. So let's try some both-and thinking instead of either-or. Here's an excerpt from the Chicago Teachers Union summary of their fact-finding analytical study titled, The Schools Chicago's Students Deserve. Quote, "The Chicago public school system denies resources to the neediest schools, uses discipline policies with a disproportionate harm on students of color, and enacts policies that increase the concentrations of students in high poverty and racially segregated schools." Close quote. Now, does that sound like teachers unconcerned with the well-being and education of students? What's not reaching the headlines is that the Teachers Union, 87% women, almost half African American and Latina, is striking on behalf of their students. That's why the strike has community support. Demonizing the union is part of a general assault to break all unions. It's also part of a nationwide effort to fire experienced teachers and turn the school system into a profit center, as already happened in many states with the prison system. Charter schools are supposed to be the holy answer, though a Stanford study showed that on the average they do less well for students than public schools. These Chicago teachers are daring to draw the line against that, with the courage to strike for the first time in a quarter of a century. In a sense, Bill Gates is a baddie here, since the film Waiting for Superman hugely exaggerated union problems and made teachers the villain. Look, teachers and their union are not perfect, but that's not the problem with schools. Here are some of the real problems, at least in Chicago. 1. In one of his first acts as mayor, Rahm Emanuel canceled teachers' contractual raises, claiming, he lacked the money. Then he gave the money to the police department, even though they had not requested it. His backers have engaged in a radio ad disinformation campaign to undermine teacher credibility. And those wealthy backers include the Koch brothers, Jonah Eldeman, Education Reform Now Super PAC, and the Gates Foundation. 2. A fact-finder's report surprised Emanuel and his school board by concluding that teachers did in fact deserve an 18% pay raise. Emanuel then rejected his own report. 3. The board says it has a $700 million deficit, yet the district just authorized more than $70 million to charter schools. It has authorized another $25 million as a, quote, strike contingency plan. That is nearly $100 million that could have gone to neighborhood schools. 4. Chicago public schools have only 325 social workers for the third largest school district in the nation. This puts their caseloads at about 1,000 students per social worker. Think Sally Field as Norma Ray in that memorable shot, standing on a table, holding up a scribbled sign reading Union. Only this time she's older, more experienced, black and Latina, and the sign she holds high reads, Students. Also, the vast majority of teachers are women, the majority of superintendents men. Bet that affects the disrespect teachers endure? Think about it, if you're not too dizzy returning to the world of spin from this alternate reality behind the headlines. Ellen Snortland is the author of Beauty Bites Beast, Awakening the Warrior within women and girls, and she is an expert in self-defense for women and girls. And she is with us today, recently having been critical of Pat Brown's book, How to Save Your Daughter's Life, because it makes women and girls the victims. But you also say that there's good things in it. Talk a little bit about that, Ellen.
Okay, well, what I really object to is Pat Brown's depiction of girls on the Today Show segment, where she made fun of self-defense and didn't make any distinctions between quality of self-defense classes. Of course, there are not useful self-defense classes out there. However, there's a whole body of self-defense classes that came out of the women's empowerment feminist movement that really regards women's self-defense as a human right. If you look at it, Mother Nature did not make all females helpless. And in fact, this is an absurd conversation to be having if we're talking about animals. You know, there's nothing feminine nor masculine about defending yourself from violence. Nothing.
Of course
it's
not.
a non-gendered conversation.
Of course.
Okay? So Pat Brown depicted girls as being limp-wristed and, you know, kind of laughed at the idea of girls defending themselves. And meanwhile, there are a whole bunch of us in the self-defense world who constantly are inspired by the ferocity, if you will, of girls that we teach in self-defense. And they are just as interested as any other being in making sure somebody doesn't just willy-nilly run them over.
Yeah.
And but I thought, well, if I'm going to be critical of Pat Brown, I better read her book.
Uh-huh.
So I did, and she actually turned me around. I admire her. I
Really?
admire her a lot. Yes. The only thing I have a severe disagreement with her about is she has very old-fashioned notions of self-defense. And she has probably seen bad self-defense classes, which there are.
Uh-huh.
There are bad self-defense classes, and frequently led by men who subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, undermine what they're teaching.
Tell me briefly, and then we'll get on to other subjects. But I mean,
okay.
Tell me briefly what you admire.
Oh, what I admire is that she brings up really difficult subjects.
I see.
And she has straight talk to parents about the life and the world that their daughters live in, the razor's edge sharp that they're walking, which that's highly sexualized on the one hand, and yet expected to be impervious to that high sexualization at all times. I mean, she's really a straight talker, and I like that.
That's good. Those are good subjects to raise. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with any of that.
Yeah.
Now, tell me what you're doing next. You're doing a film on self-defense. You've done two books. You co-authored The Safety Godmothers. Yes,
with Lisa Gaeta.
Yeah.
And a man who runs a factory in Mexico read my book, Beauty Bites Beast, and contacted me, and he said, you know what? I have had the privilege of not understanding how privileged I am. I mean, it was like, wow, I get chills when I think about this email. And he said, I have about 35 women who work for me, and after I read your book, I'm looking at them going, oh my goodness, no wonder they can't look at me in the eyes. And no wonder they have this life where they're afraid on the streets. Many of them are afraid in their homes. What would it take for you to come down and give the women who work for me self-defense class?
Terrific. Oh, wow. That's really good.
Yes, so that's the basis of my documentary, Beauty Bites Beast.
Oh, that's going to be such a good movie.
I know, right? You see these women who really have never seen a woman stand up to a man in their home, in their churches, on the street, because you don't know what kind of can of whoop-ass you're going to open up if
That's
you
right.
challenge somebody, right?
That's right.
And
you know, the funny thing is also it stays with you. I mean, I took in the 70s when we were doing this. I first took self-defense, and then I got into it, and I started Taekwondo, and I worked my way all the way up to a brown belt. Never made black belt. Gave it up after a certain point. But the funniest thing was that when I was pregnant, I asked my gynecologist, "Can I keep doing this if I don't take any front falls?" He had never been asked this, of course, before.
Right.
But he said, well, okay, just nobody kicks you in the stomach. Well, obviously not, I said, and no front falls. So I went back to the dojo and I announced I was going to do this, and then there was a problem with the male teacher who was horrified. But I, in fact, continued and felt very fit up to my 5th month.
Yes.
And then years later, when I hadn't, I'd been going to the gym or stuff, but I hadn't done self-defense or Taekwondo or anything for years later, decades later, in fact, I was more than harassed on the street by a guy who then started to mug me. And it was muscle memory. I would have sworn that if you pushed me with a finger, I would, fall over sideways. But instead, before I knew it, up came my knee and out came my fist, and the guy fell down. And I was so I don't know who was more shocked. He was out because he was totally out and unconscious. I stood there gawking as what have I wrought, and then ran like hell. Yes. But it shows that once you've learned it, you've learned it.
That's right, and muscle memory is the key there. Once you learn how to ride a bike or once you learn how to swim, you don't need to have refresher courses. It is there. Your body owns it. It is the moral property of your body, if you will. It's the same thing with self-defense. And one of the things that we deal with all the time is that movies depict two things, and obviously many more. One is that men are invincible and they can take punch after punch after punch after punch after punch and then get back up and take some more. This is not true. Men are flesh and blood. And that's why your assailant was very surprised, because he was operating on a script that women are pushovers and they don't fight back. And that's been basically pummeled into our consciousness like the truth. Well, it's not the truth. Men are flesh and blood, and their eyeballs, an assailant's eyeballs are just the same size as yours.
Yes.
And if you do something to resist, there's a break in the script right there.
There you go.
On the other
Hang on.
of it,
We've only got about 15 seconds, so
okay.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
But people
just
should
have me on again.
I will do that, and people will buy your books, and soon we'll get to see the film, I hope.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks so much, Ellen.
Thank you, Robin.
Take care of yourself, and I know you will.
Yes, I will.
Okay. We're going to take a little break now. During that, you can tell us what you're thinking on our comment line at 347-903-WMC1. This is Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain. I'm Robin Morgan, and our next guest is woman in the news, Karen Lewis, president of the Chicago Teachers Union. Don't go away.
Chicago teachers and students are likely to return to the classroom tomorrow as the union and the city hash out a final agreement. Was there a sexist element here? Karen Lewis, president of the Chicago Teachers Union, answers that question when we return.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Will you be in New York City on the evening of September 24th? You are invited to join WMC Live's Robin Morgan at the Tribeca Performing Arts Center, where she will participate in a forum with 3 Nobel laureates: Shirin Ebadi, a human rights lawyer and the first Muslim woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize; Lima Bowie, an inspiring Liberian activist honored with the Nobel Prize for organizing women across ethnic and religious divides to force a violent warlord into exile and to pave the way for the election of Africa's first female head of state; and Jody Williams, an American peace activist who received the Nobel Peace Prize for her work to ban landmines. The evening offers a conversation with Nobel laureates and activists at the forefront of the campaign to stop rape and conflict. Lauren Wolf, director of WMC's Women Under Siege project, will moderate the conversation. To RSVP or for more information, email wmcnobel@womensmediacenter.com.
The following interview was recorded just before a tentative agreement in principle was reported between Chicago Public Schools and the Teachers Union. Karen Lewis, the amazing Karen Lewis, whom even the New York Times on their front page calls amazing, is with us today. She is the head of the Chicago Teachers Union, which has become the thin red line between good education and teachers' rights and students' rights and parents' rights on one side, and on the other side, the corporatization of education. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for sparing us the time. You are having amazing support from parents and community, and in fact, I think it was something like 90% of the union voted to strike. So the word is beginning to get out that this is not just about, as the right wing would have it, selfish teachers, but in fact about students and the quality of education. Could you talk a little about how you found yourselves on the front line of what seems to me a national confrontation over charter schools and standardized testing and the corporatization of education? I don't know what else to call it. Talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, actually, the group that took over the union 2 years ago, we were all teachers. We're CORE, the Caucus of Rank and File Educators. And we started out basically reading studies about what was going on in public education. And we started like a book club, so to speak, about 8 of us sitting around a table. And what we wanted to do was have our union leadership move in a different direction instead of the service model of union, to be in a more organizing model so that we could work together with the community and with parents to address the situation, because we can't fight the Board of Education by itself.
Right. When was this? This was a couple of years ago?
Well, we started in 2009.
Uh-huh.
We started in 2009, around April, sitting around, and we're trying to figure out whether or not we would even have a political election strategy. And we decided when our union wasn't moving in the direction we thought it needed to move, we decided to run. And this was never my dream job by any stretch of imagination.
You were a chemistry teacher, right?
Exactly. And I had my dream job. I was at a great school not far from my house, with great parents, a wonderful principal. So I wasn't one of the people that was in danger of losing their job or any of those things, but I knew as a product of Chicago Public Schools, my parents were both Chicago Public Schools teachers, and I just knew there was something incredibly wrong that we had to speak out against. I never thought it would come to this level. Frankly, I'm overwhelmed by the outpouring. It also embarrasses me, actually. I'm not used to this. I'm a school teacher. So for me, this is a whole new concept of what it is we have to do. But if we don't speak and we don't voice our frustration and we don't tell people what's really going on. So it's easy for people to try to characterize us as, well, you don't want to be held accountable. And it's all this like jargon.
Yeah.
It's like, I definitely want to be held accountable for what I do. I don't want to be held accountable for what I don't have control over.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's where most of our teachers and paraprofessionals and clinicians are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, teachers are the transmitters of not only knowledge, but how to acquire knowledge. So it seems to me, and knowledge is power. So it seems to me that finally your group and what's happening at CTU is exercising that. I mean,
Yes.
Many unions today are under attack, and they're in Wisconsin. They basically lost. In Ohio, they basically won, and the teachers' union nationally is under assault. But you have, as an accidental activist, become the front line. The press, interestingly enough, keeps saying you are the one woman who can match Rahm Emanuel's ferocity. So this gives feminists a be still my heart moment.
Well, I think it's so easy to make an antagonist and a protagonist, right? And
yes.
That's not hard to do, and I think it simplifies what the real situation is going on, because it's not that personal as far as I'm concerned, but this is about not only the soul of public education, but what's going on in our schools for children who are struggling and live in horrendous circumstances. In addition, people have to remember Chicago is the most segregated city in America.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. This is so not
all
my
by
fault.
yourself. You didn't do that.
Yes.
Huh? Yeah.
I didn't do that.
But it's so convenient to demonize you. Right.
It is. And it's like, there's also this summer we have had an enormous spike in murders. It's almost gone up 60%.
In murders.
Year. In murders. So one of the things that concerns us is that our children are nephews and nieces, sons and daughters, grandchildren of cousins, of the people who are being murdered on a regular basis, and some of our own students.
And that affects their lives. That affects their schooling.
It absolutely does. And we have 325 social workers for 400,000 children. And I don't understand why that demonizes us, why we can't say to them. And all we continue here is, well, we don't have any money, we don't have any money. Okay, if you don't have any money, then prioritize it appropriately then.
Yeah.
Why are you spending money on consulting groups to tell you how to do a longer day when we sat down and did some math on the back of a napkin and had it done in literally minutes?
Karen,
approached it, gave it to them. They didn't want it until it became desperate for them.
Karen, tell me, we've got about 4 minutes left. Tell me, this is a chance for us to really hear it from the teacher's mouth. What would cure our education system? If you had your druthers, if the blue fairy appeared and waved her wings and said, "Okay, Karen Lewis, you've earned it. I'm going to wave my wand." Some of the things are obvious, that the money that goes into all sorts of munitions and everything goes into education instead. But if you had your druthers, what would cure it?
Well, what would cure it is start having honest conversations about it. What would cure it would have local control to the people that actually work in the schools, the parents and the administrators, that could come together on some level and make this happen. Mm-hmm. The problem is we don't have a lot of trust, and there's this whole idea of management, labor, and I'm just going to crush you, you do what you say, stay in your place and be told. The problem is that we have a lot of ideas about how to fix things, and they're not comprehensive in terms of I can give you a one answer to that. I wish I could, but the problem is that for the most part, public education really isn't broken. It's the other things that make it appear to be broken.
Uh-huh.
And I think that people don't understand when they talk about the test scores and how we are globally. When you factor out poverty, we rank number 1 in reading and in science, and we rank number 3 in mathematics.
How interesting.
When you factor out poverty. But because the United States has such a high child poverty level, we have almost 25% of our children in poverty, it brings down our scores. So that's one thing. If we're looking at scores, I personally don't like looking at test scores because they are designed so that a certain amount of children are going to, quote unquote, fail. And those children seem to always be poor, black and brown, or English language learners, emergent bilinguals.
And also some children test well and some children don't. That doesn't mean that they didn't really learn.
No, exactly. And I mean, I have seen this phenomenon ever since I started teaching. When I use teacher-made tests, when I use standardized tests, who does better? Children, I remember there were boys in my class, I taught chemistry, boys in my class would take the standardized test from the book and get really good scores, and it were basically failing my class. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't do any work, or they wouldn't pay attention or whatever, but they could take tests. And the little girls who were just struggling with the test, but were doing all their work and, thinking, because that makes them write labs instead of just, do things simply. But the other problem is learning does not take place overnight. So there's this insistence in the so-called reform movement that something be done now. And because of that, it's distorting what really should be happening. So they come up with some crazy idea and slam it in, and then all of a sudden there are high stakes attached to it, and kids aren't being promoted, or teachers are now being vilified even more. I mean, so it's a real problem.
Oh, well, it's you, and the work that you're doing is absolutely crucial, I think, to the future of this country. And sometimes in my more paranoid moments, I think that the reason teachers get dissed so much and demonized and trivialized is because most of them are women.
Well, I don't think you can not factor that out. I think, I understand exactly how you feel. And for those of us in Chicago, for many years, we had a very large Black
and Latina
female population.
Yes.
For teachers. Now that's gone down. Yeah. But we still have a lot of young women, and part of the problem is the people who have been in charge have been men and have been telling us what to do. Mm-hmm. And the last few board presidents have not, and CEOs have not spent a minute in a classroom. The one we have now has, but he's also not from here. So that's the other issue that we have, is that we have a revolving door of administrators with a revolving door of ideas on how to fix education. And, because this has been going on for 30 years. This is not happening just because we have a new mayor.
Of course not. Of course not.
So I think it's important for people to understand that this has been a very long process of demonizing teachers and basically where we were once revered in the community. So
well, apparently you still are, because the community is turning out in marches of 20,000 people, parents and kids supporting you, and women all over the country are supporting you, and hopefully intelligent men too. But we identify with you, and we identify with what's happening to our kids. And you're just beautiful. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And keep on keeping on. And let us know if there's anything we can do. I don't know, spot demonstrations in support all across the country if this goes on.
That would be wonderful.
Take care, Karen. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
It's time for another pause. So you tweeps can tweet us a comment at hashtag WMC Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live from our home on the web, WMCLive.com. We will be right back with author Lynn Povich, and then verbal karate, so stick around.
A small band of women successfully challenged Newsweek in the 1970s, the first women in the media to sue on grounds of sex discrimination. Lynn Povich, author of the Good Girls Revolt, was one. How far have women come, and how far do we have to go? Coming up next.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Will you be in the San Francisco Bay Area on October 19th? Please join Carol Jenkins, the founding president of the Women's Media Center, at the Pioneers Conference in San Rafael on the morning of October 19th, where she discusses media failures and solutions on race, class, gender, faith, and politics. On the afternoon of October 19th, Carol joins Jody Evans, chair of the board of the Women's Media Center, Amy Allison, co-executive director of Roots Action, and Rose Aguilar, host of Your Call on KALW 91.7 FM, and a panel about changing the stories that create culture and how we tell our own stories. For more information, visit conference.pioneersgroup.com. Will you be in New York City on Thursday, September 27th? The Women's Media Center co-hosts Great Debates, Why They Matter, and What is at Stake. Featuring Barbara Walters, a presidential debate moderator in 1976 and 1984, and Carol Simpson, a presidential moderator in 1992, Bill Wheatley, executive producer at NBC News, Dr. Mina Bose, director of Hofstra's Peter Kalikow Center for the Study of the American Presidency, and Caitlin Thompson, director of online political coverage at WNYC. Great Debates is sponsored by the Paley Center for the Media and the DuPont Columbia Awards in association with the Women's Media Center and the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. For more information and to purchase tickets, contact events@womensmediacenter.com.
Lynn Povich began her career at Newsweek as a secretary, and in 1975 became the first woman senior editor in the magazine's history. Since leaving the magazine in 91, she's been editor-in-chief of Working Woman magazine and managing editor, senior executive producer for MSNBC.com, and she has now written a highly necessary and highly entertaining and educative book called The Good Girls Revolt, How the Women of Newsweek Sued Their Bosses and Changed the Workplace, and she was one of them. Welcome, Lynn.
Thanks, Robin. Great to be with you.
So you were clearly among the small band of women who challenged Newsweek successfully in the early 1970s, and you became the first women in the media to sue on the grounds of sex discrimination. Well, I'm so glad you wrote this book, because if we don't tell our story, they will. When did you decide to write Good Girls Revolt?
Well, I started about 5 years ago because I had taken the papers home with me from our lawsuit, and Radcliffe had requested at the time that we sued in 1970 to have the papers in their archives because we were the first women to sue, and I hadn't done anything and realized, you know what, I really should send the papers to Radcliffe. And when I looked at the papers, I thought they won't understand it unless I actually write a narrative of what happened. And so that's when I went back and started interviewing all of the women involved and some of the other people as well.
Yes, the other people, indeed. It's also lovely because at the end you have the where are they now? And so the whole arc of the women's lives and how the revolt transformed them and you is in the book as well. It reads like a novel.
Well, thank you.
Your pro bono lawyer at the time was Ellen Holmes Norton, who is an old friend, a long-distance runner, and who then at the time was assistant legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union, and of course is now a congresswoman. She, in fact, was on the show just a week or so ago. And in the book, you talk about the tough love that she gave you all. Tell about that.
Well, you know, we were a group of very highly educated, middle-class white women who were raised to think that we would get married and have children, and yet we saw this injustice and wanted to do something about it. But many of us just thought we should tell the guys, or, you know, if they only knew it was illegal, they would do something. And she gave us like a 6-week boot camp to toughen us up and tell us, you know, you can't just go to daddy. What do you think? You can't just go to daddy and ask for something. You know, people with power don't want to give up power, and you've got to take off your white gloves, girls, and, you know, learn how to fight. And she was marvelous. She said, you know, if I didn't keep you all together and toughen you up, they would have started picking you off, and the most vulnerable, you know, would have been lost.
She's right. And of course, she was seasoned through the civil rights movement, so she knew whereof she spoke.
Yes, she did. And she was one of the few prominent black women who also identified as a feminist and really believed black women should be part of the women's movement. And I would say one of the regrets of our early case was that we had asked the black researchers to join us, they declined because they just felt their first loyalty was to the civil rights movement, and that they were discriminated more as blacks than they were as women at the time. And if the blacks were ever going to do anything in the media, they should join that first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, those were the days of that kind of separatism before we all realized we all hang together or we all hang separately.
Correct. Yes.
You know, have things at Newsweek the last time you peeked in changed that much? Because we've had trouble. Wasn't it Newsweek who ran the famous spinster myth that it was something about you had a...
there was a marriage crunch about how so few women get married after a certain age. That
right.
was in the 80s, I believe.
That's right.
You know, I talked to young women...
And it was data that was untrue completely, by the way.
Yeah. Turned out to be. I talked to young women in 2009, 2010. This is before Tina Brown has taken over Newsweek, so it's quite different now. But it felt like to these young women that it was a boys' club, that somehow they were marginalized, that young men with their credentials or less were getting ahead faster than they or getting better assignments. And what was interesting to me at the time was that these young women were feeling very frustrated, but not knowing what the problem was, because it was supposedly post-feminism and the sex wars were over and we are all equal now, so it couldn't be discrimination.
And Newsweek was telling the world that, by the way, at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, they were running covers. I believe they wrote a story about this, these three young women, for Newsweek in 2010, and they said something of like the last 47 covers of Newsweek in those years, I think only 9 were written by women.
It just flew so
And, you know, it's fascinating to me now that there are now these counts by VITA and other organizations. Women's Media Center is great in keeping counts of bylines and where women are in the media, not only in positions, but who's writing for them.
Exactly.
And the fact that only 30% of the bylines in Thought magazines are by women. So
yeah.
I think it's so important what you all are doing and how you're naming and shaming people, because there has to be pressure from the outside.
Thank you. Yeah, if there's not, nothing's going to change. Do you think things are different since Tina Brown has been there? Because sometimes a woman at the top makes a difference and sometimes she doesn't.
Well, I definitely think she has more women in executive positions. That's true. But, Tina likes to be provocative, and so she has run some very provocative stories about women. And so I think, you just have to look at the magazine and judge for yourself.
Yeah, interesting. And what is next for you?
Well, I'm obviously going to try and get the word out about our case, which has long been forgotten even at Newsweek, and also to engage young women in sort of carrying on the fight. I'm sort of encouraged by how women's issues are coming to the fore again in the political season, and especially that young women are realizing that these rights that we've all just accepted are really being threatened, and that we have to organize and do something again about it. So I'm going to try to enlist younger women and talk about our history.
I think you'll find them really ready now. I mean, it's been another media myth that younger women weren't interested in feminism, but to the extent that they thought it was their mother's Oldsmobile, you can always count on the extreme right to present a radicalizing experience. And I think folks who thought, oh yes, well, abortion rights and contraceptive, it's all, all those things are taken care of. And then along comes Rick Santorum and just the whole passel this past year. And Aiken with legitimate rape, so it's unbelievable. It's almost surreal to those of us, I think, who've been through it. But I think to younger women, they have leapt to the forefront now. And all I know is when I go to speak, there are packed audiences, and they're all young, and there are some principled men of conscience there, and they're all pissed for the right reasons. So I have great hope. I think you will find a very ready audience, and they're very hungry also to know the shoulders they stand on and the history or the herstory. So I'm very glad.
Well, that has surprised me too. I'm amazed. I knew people our age would understand this history and be interested, but I too have been amazed at the response among young women. So I'm rooting for them.
Oh, there you go. And I'm rooting for you. And thank you so much for doing this. And we'll all go out and buy copies of the Good Girls Revolt, How the Women of Newsweek Sued Their Bosses and Changed the Workplace. They may not have changed it totally, but they sure made a big dent. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Robin. It was my pleasure.
Now it's time for verbal karate. And we start with questions for the media kick. Why does no one ask Governor Romney about his Mormonism? I don't mean in a confrontational or accusatory way, just an informational one. It has become as unmentionable as FDR's polio once was, or as the media gentleman's agreement never to mention JFK's womanizing was. But lots of questions were asked about JFK's loyalty and obedience to the Roman Catholic Church, to the authority of the Pope, to canon law. So I would like to know the following about the effect of certain policies of the Latter-day Saints Church on Romney. For example, the LDS Church had a revelation and finally admitted African Americans out of hell and into heaven for the first time in 1978, and allowed African American men, to aspire to the priesthood. Even today, the priesthood to which Mormon men, all Mormon men, can belong, is totally barred to women. Romney says repeatedly how central to his life his church is. He was a missionary, and he was later a bishop. Is it so odd, then, to want the press to inquire respectfully, how do LDS church policies on race and gender affect his policies? They sure hammered Obama over Reverend Wright's sermons. Now to the surprise, words really do mean things, chop. These are cullings from the fine work of Rosalie Maggio, who's published numerous books on anti-sexist and anti-racist language, and Rosalie is collaborating on a new book with the Women's Media Center to be called Unspinning the Spin. So the first phrase this week is First Lady. You know, it's honorary. In no way is it an official title. It came in 1849 when President Zachary Taylor eulogized Dolly Madison as being truly a First Lady. But the term didn't take off until 1911 when there was a hit play about her. Fortunately, these days it has begun to fall into disuse. Jacqueline Kennedy said, "The one thing I do not want to be called is First Lady. It sounds like a saddle horse." I'm not quite sure what a saddle horse is, but she was a Bouvier and they were, a horsey set. Anyway, this will all be solved when we have the first Madam President, because if she has a spouse and the spouse is male, you can bet he won't be first gentleman. Meanwhile, could we just please call these people by their names? The second phrase to avoid this week is intelligent design, which is still creationism, which is accurately known as evolution denial, but it's in disguise. Religious conservatives want this fantasy taught instead of science, biology, and evolution. So far as I'm concerned, proof that there is no such thing as intelligent design resides simply in the existence of Donald Trump. Enough said. We'll take another short break here. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain, via its home on the web, WMCLive.com. Coming up is the indefatigable Gloria Feldt, and then Afterthoughts. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Gloria Feldt, a feminist speaker, activist, and Women's Media Center board member, discusses her ideas on women's leadership and why the time is right for it.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Will you be in Washington, D.C. on October 25th? Please join us as the Women's Media Center celebrates the work and life of journalist Molly Ivins at the arena stage production of Red Hot Patriot, starring Kathleen Turner. Kathleen Turner joins Women's Media Center board member Gloria Feldt at a special post-play reception for the Women's Media Center. For tickets and more information, email redhotpatriot@womensmediacenter.com. Will you be in New York City on November 13th? The Women's Media Center Awards celebrate Pat Mitchell, the president and CEO of the Paley Center for Women, Martha Nelson, editorial director of Time Inc., Laura Ling, correspondent for Current TV and vice president of Vanguard Journalism Unit, Lisa Ling, host of Oprah Winfrey Network's Our America with Lisa Ling, and Sarah Hoy, all-platform journalists at CNN. To buy tickets and sponsorships to the awards, please contact Media Awards at womensmediacenter.com.
Gloria Feldt is a one-woman women's movement. She does everything. She is a leading speaker. She's a book author. She's an activist. She teaches a class in women's power and leadership at Arizona State. She's the former president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Her previous books include a bestseller, Send Yourself Roses, which was co-written with actress Kathleen Turner, and a book called The War on Choice, The Right-Wing Attack on Women's Rights and How to Fight Back, very needed book, and also a book called Behind Every Choice is a Story, and she has a new book called No Excuses, 9 Ways Women Can Change How We Think About Power, and she is a sister on the board of the Women's Media Center. So welcome, Gloria.
Thanks, Robin. I am really so glad to be here with you.
Well, not as glad as we are to have you here with us. So plunge right in. Talk about the new book, or it's not that new, but it's new. It's new enough.
Yes, it's. I think the subject of women and power and women's relationship with power is something of an evergreen until we get to parity, which is really where I hope we are aiming for now. We've opened the doors, but nobody's going to walk us through them at this point except ourselves. And
yes.
So that's really what I wanted to try to talk about in No Excuses. And, like you, Robin, I've been an activist for women for decades, from the lowliest of the grassroots to some pretty high halls of power. And
well, you're extraordinary because you started as a teen mom in Texas, right? Rural West Texas.
That's true. That's true. Not exactly starting from a position of power myself. And one of the things, last weekend I spoke to a group of very young, mostly teen moms here in New York City, and I really enjoyed that conversation because it made me remember that nobody's born knowing this stuff.
Of course not.
You have to learn it along the way, and sometimes through a lot of hard knocks.
Yep.
But those hard knocks are very valuable life lessons, and so I feel privileged to have an opportunity at this point to try to share those lessons that I've learned the hard way, as well as what I learned from talking with women all around the country and looking at the research that has been done. Goodness knows there is no dearth of research on how far women haven't come,
yes,
as well as how far we have come.
It's always nice that nowadays the academics are validating what feminists have been saying all along.
Yes. Now, to that I will also say, though, that I believe women are at an amazing moment. I actually am extremely optimistic. But what I know, and what I'm pretty sure you know from your work in the women's movement, moments don't last. You have to take them when they come. And, all this talk right now about the end of men, how predictable is that? It comes from a very old-fashioned, no longer relevant view of what power is. It comes from a notion that power means the power over somebody.
No, it means power to do something.
Exactly, and I think we women, particularly
we're redefining it, aren't we?
We are redefining it. There is a power paradigm transformation going on right now that women are able to bring to the table, and I believe that that's why, how Ernst & Young and McKinsey and all the big consulting companies are now saying that those companies that have more women on their upper management and in their boards of directors make more money.
Duh.
Well, there are qualities that women bring. It doesn't mean we're better than men. It's just that more of that diversity of thinking around the table is only good for everybody. And that's why I think this is such an incredible moment, because people are starting to realize it, not just those of us who have been on the front lines battling for all these years.
Yes, and I mean, you can always count on the extreme right wing to be a consciousness raiser when nothing else is, because their assault, I think, has changed the minds of a lot of folks who thought this was over, or younger women who thought maybe this was their mother's Oldsmobile feminism, or women of any age who kind of thought, well, sure, since the media often says it's feminism is done, it's finished, there's no need for it, we've won. I don't know about you, but I must have been in the shower and missed it. And so the right wing has now radicalized a whole batch of new people, and they're ready to go.
We could certainly thank them for that. You probably hear, as I do almost every day, someone says, "What? Birth control?
Yeah.
Going after birth control?"
Exactly.
And we're saying, well, yes, we've been trying to explain to you that really many of these battles that we have fought, for example, the seemingly intractable battle over abortion, is not about abortion at all, but it's about a much bigger worldview about women's place in the world.
Exactly. Yes.
And so birth control is just as much a part of it as is abortion, as is women's economic self-sufficiency and women's economic power. I really think the next big leap for women is to gain equality in economic power.
I think you're right. I think, we're tired of the World Bank, finally, at least they pay lip service now in the IMF. But as Bella Abzug used to say, we've heard the words, now we want the music.
Yes, and microfinance is good. Microcredit is good. Microloans, to help women start small businesses. That's not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing, and it helps many, many women all around the country.
Not enough.
But it's not enough. And I think what we need to be pushing for is, where are the women who will create the new technologies, the Facebooks, the Apple computers, the
Precisely.
Microsoft? Where are those women? Those are the women who really will change the
Precisely.
power paradigm.
Gloria, we've got about another minute. Talk just briefly, if you will, about your vision for this new leadership plan that you have.
Thanks, Robin. Because I do believe this is the moment for women to reach parity from the boardroom to the bedroom, and because personal relationships, workplace, and politics, the power dynamics are all the same. I'm working on creating a new leadership program called Take the Lead, and the goal is nothing short of enabling women to reach parity in all leadership roles across all sectors by 2025. I like that because it's 13 years from now, and 13 is my favorite number.
It's a lucky number for witches and women.
Yes, it is. And my birthday also.
Okay, there you go. So people can find Gloria Feldt and all the things that she does and writes and blogs and just a myriad of energy. Find her on Twitter and find her on Facebook and find her own websites. And gloriafeldt.com, and find her books and get her to come and lecture, because she's a fuse, a burning fuse that lights women's energy. Thank you so much for being with us today, and will you come back?
Thank you, Robin. I'm yours anytime.
All right. Take care, Gloria.
You too.
Now it's time for some afterthoughts. The phrases new media, old media, even legacy media have entered everyday usage. So this got me musing about the types of media that haven't. Some ancient but still operative remain under certain circumstances the only media reliable, like drums, still used to alert villages in the Congo that armed men are near, so women can hide in the bush from the epidemic of gang rapes there. The army can jam cell phone signals, but they can't silence the drums. Drums are media. The skillfully tended fires of indigenous peoples in the Americas emitted a range of smoke signals, constituting a sophisticated medium that confounded the European newcomers. A Chilean arpillera is a work of art and code combined. Tiny doll-like stuffed cloth figures are carefully sewn onto a stitched background, and it seems just a lovely piece of needlework until you look closer and notice it's a pictorial map, a guide to safe houses. Arpilleras became popular during the long years of Chile's dictatorship. The junta paid no attention to them because, it was just a woman's craft. If men did it, it was art. If women did it, it was a craft. I carry an exquisite eyeglass case, also needleworked, in the great art of Palestinian women, embroidery. The Palestinian flag's colors, which at one point were illegal to display, are camouflaged in among the other shades. The word Palestine itself is subtly tucked in amid the dense embroidery. In the northern Cordillera regions of the Philippines, the rice paddies, they're terraced upward along the mountainsides. They make you blink and stare to be sure you're not hallucinating. Spelled out, in English yet, in huge letters formed by the patterning of the paddies, are words: freedom, revolution, love. The San people, also known as the Bushmen, leave stones in certain patterns as messages. So do the Aboriginal peoples of Australia. All these are media. So is the prisoner's tap on the cell wall. In 1991, the world learned of a recently discovered ancient language devised at least 1,000 years earlier in central China's Hunan province. It was a totally female language. Hundreds of stories, poems, letters, written in a unique script invented by rural women for their own secret use. Chinese linguists believe that the women developed Nushu, that's what it's called, women's writing, because they were forbidden to learn standard writing. When female education became finally permissible, the practice of Nushu declined. By the 1980s, only a dozen elderly women were still able to read it, but 3 could still write it. New media aren't just Twitter and apps and Skype. All that we know as media is new, given our species' long history of trying to reach one another, send word, touch minds. Media are as old as poems chanted around the fire, and as new as the mathematical hello signals beamed out into the galaxy, longing for not just an echo, but a response from intelligent life signaling back, you are not alone. Hello? 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 Well, we're out of time. Remember to let us know what you think. The comment line is 347-903-WMC1, and on Twitter it's hashtag WMC Live. Our home on the web is WMClive.com, where you can find links to all our online channels, including Ustream and podcast. And the day after each program, you can find a transcript of the show at womensmediacenter.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. The views expressed in the commentaries and interviews do not represent the Women's Media Center. And here is the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program, Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, Producer and Technical Director Michelle Kinsey-Bruns, and Production Assistant Nora Eakin. Thanks for listening. I'm Robin Morgan, hoping that when you next see a teacher, you give her some praise and thanks, and that you join us next week where we might have a very special surprise on Women's Media Center Live.
Women's Media Center Live is brought to you by Regina Kulik-Scully, our superwoman for women in media. You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.